Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 116. Chapter 116. On the 31st of December, New Year's Eve, 1809, an old grandee of Catherine's day was giving a ball and midnight supper. The diplomatic corps and the emperor himself were to be present. The grandee's well-known mansion on the 8th quay glittered with innumerable lights. Police were stationed at the brightly lit entrance, which was carpeted with red baize. And not only gendarmes, but dozens of police officers, and even the police master himself, stood at the porch. Carriages kept driving away, and fresh ones arriving, with red-liveried footmen and footmen in plumed hats. From the carriages emerged men wearing uniforms, stars, and ribbons, while ladies in satin and ermine cautiously descended the carriage steps, which were let down for them with a clatter, and then walked hurriedly and noiselessly over the baize at the entrance. Almost every time a new carriage drove up, a whisper ran through the crowd, and caps were doffed. The emperor? No, a minister, prince, ambassador. Don't you see the plumes? Was whispered among the crowds. One person, better dressed than the rest, seemed to know everyone, and mentioned by name the greatest dignitaries of the day. A third of the visitors had already arrived, but the Rostovs, who were to be present, were still hurrying to get dressed. There had been many discussions and preparations for this ball in the Rostov family, many fears that the invitation would not arrive, that the dresses would not be ready, or that something would not be arranged as it should be. Maria Ignatievna Peronskaya, a thin and shallow maid of honor at the court of the Dowager Empress, who was a friend and relation of the Countess, and piloted the provincial Rostovs in Petersburg high society, was to accompany them to the ball. They were to call for her at her house in the Taurida Gardens at 10 o'clock, but it was already 5 minutes to 10, and the girls were not yet dressed. Natasha was going to her first grand ball. She had got up at 8 that morning, and had been in a fever of excitement and activity all day. All her power since morning had been concentrated on ensuring that they all, she, herself, Mama, and Sonia, should be as well dressed as possible. Sonia and her mother put themselves entirely in her hands. The Countess was to wear a claret-covered dress, and the two girls white gauze over pink silk slips, with roses on their bodices, and their hair dressed à la Greek. Everything essential had already been done. Feet, hands, necks, and ears washed, perfumed and powdered, as befits a ball. The open-work silk stockings and white satin shoes with ribbons were already on. The hairdressing was almost done. Sonia was finishing dressing, and so was the Countess, but Natasha, who had bustled about helping them all, was behindhand. She was still sitting before a looking-glass with a dressing jacket thrown over her slender shoulders. Sonia stood ready dressed in the middle of the room, and pressing the head of a pen till it hurt her dainty finger, was fixing on a last ribbon that squeaked as the pen went through it. That's not the way, Sonia," cried Natasha, turning her head, and clutching with both hands at her hair, which the maid who was dressing it had not time to release. "The bow is not right. Come here." Sonia sat down, and Natasha pinned the ribbon on differently. "Allow me, miss. I can't do it like that," said the maid who was holding Natasha's hair. "Ah, dear. Well, wait then. That's right, Sonia." "Aren't you ready? It's nearly 10, came the Countess's voice. Directly, directly. And you, Mamma? I have only my cap to pin on. Don't do it without me, called Natasha. You won't do it right. But it's already 10. They had decided to be at the ball by 10:30, and Natasha had still to get dressed, and they had to call at the Tarinda Gardens. When her hair was done, Natasha, in her short petticoat from under which her dancing shoes showed, and in her mother's dressing jacket, ran up to Sonia, scrutinized her, and then ran to her mother. Turning her mother's head this way and that, she fastened on the cap, and hurriedly kissing her gray hair, ran back to the maids who were turning the hem up of her skirt. The cause of the delay was Natasha's skirt, which was too long. 2 maids were turning up the hem and hurriedly biting off the ends of the thread. A third, with pins in her mouth, was running about between the Countess and Sonia, and a fourth held the whole of the gossamer garment up high, with one uplifted hand. Marva, quicker, darling. Give me my thimble, miss, from there. Whenever will you be ready? Asked the Count, coming into the door. Here is some scent. Perovskaya must be tired of waiting. It's ready, miss, said the maid, holding up the shortened gauze dress with 2 fingers and blowing and shaking something off it, as if by this to express a conscientiousness of the airness and the purity of what she held. Natasha began putting on the dress. In a minute, don't come in, Papa, she cried to her father as he opened the door, speaking from under the filmy skirt which still covered her whole face. Sonia slammed the door to. A minute later, they let the Count in. He was wearing a blue swallow-tail coat, shoes and stockings, and was perfumed and his hair pomaded. Oh, Papa, how nice you look. Charming, cried Natasha, as she stood in the middle of the room, smoothing out the folds of her gauze. If you please, miss, allow me, said the maid, who on her knees was pulling the skirt straight and shifting the pins from one side of her mouth to the other with her tongue. Say what you like, exclaimed Sonia in a despairing voice as she looked at Natasha. Say what you like, it's still too long. Natasha stepped back to look at herself in the pier glass. The dress was too long. Really, madame, it is not all too long, said Marva, crawling on her knees after the young lady. Well, if it's too long, we'll tack it up. We'll tack it up in 1 minute, said the resolute Dunashaya, taking a needle that was stuck in the front of her little shawl, and, still kneeling on the floor, set to work once more. At that moment, with soft steps, the Countess came in shyly, in her cap and velvet gown. Oh, my beauty, exclaimed the Count. She looks better than any of you. He would have embraced her, but, blushing, she stepped aside, fearing to be rumpled. Mamma, your cap, more to this side, said Natasha. I'll arrange it. And she rushed forward, so that the maids who were tacking up her skirt could not move fast enough, and a piece of gauze was torn off. Oh, goodness, what has happened? Really, it was not my fault. Never mind, I'll run it up. It won't show, said Dunyasha. What a beauty, a very queen, said the nurse as she came to the door. And Sonia, they are lovely. At 10:15, at last they got into their carriages and started, but they had still to call at the Tarinda Gardens. Perovskaya was quite ready. In spite of her age and plainness, she had gone through the same process as the Rostovs, but with less flurry, for to her it was a matter of routine. Her ugly body was washed, perfumed, and powdered in just the same way. She had washed behind her ears just as carefully, and when she entered her drawing room in her yellow dress, wearing her badge as maid of honor, her old lady's maid was as full of rapturous admiration as the Rostov servants had been. She praised the Rostovs' toilets. They praised her taste and toilet, and at 11 o'clock, careful of their hairstyles and dresses, they settled themselves in their carriages and drove off. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 116. Hope you liked it. I'll now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 116. Revving up for La Réveillon. In her Vindication of the Rights of Women, Mary Wollstonecraft, on treating the role of parents in a child's life, writes that parental affection produces filial duty. We've seen throughout the novel so far all that the Count and Countess Rostov have done for their children. They've gone beyond the basic obligations of providing food, clothing, and shelter. They've also served as confidants, counselors, and, at least in the case of the Count, a peerless tutor in the timeless art of busting a move. They've done this all at great expense, maybe too much expense. So much so, in fact, that the time is rapidly approaching when the Rostov children will need to step up their filial duty game if old Wollstonecraft's dictum is to be vindicated. Natasha is already on the ball. Literally. Today she directs the entire Rostov family's preparation for the very important New Year's Eve ball of 1809. Now, preparing a privileged, entitled, aristocratic Russian family for a ball may seem in this inequality-obsessed age of ours like a disgustingly fiddling occupation to use as an example of the role of duty in a child's life, but we must remember, even if we're lowly no-count people from Queens like yours truly, that in the words of Radiohead, everything in its right place. This is what is expected of Natasha. She fulfills her role properly. She's up first thing in the morning, and she goes hard non-stop until everyone is ready. She dresses everyone. She frets that Sonia's bow is not quite right, that her mother's cap is not pinned properly, and treating herself last, that her own dress is too long. In the end, her frantic work gets everything together satisfactorily, and she heads to her first ball. What Natasha accomplishes in this chapter will soon seem like small beans once the Rostov's financial world collapses under the weight of its own debts. But it is a start. Moving forward, let's see how Natasha continues to uphold her filial duties. Spoiler alert, not too good. Daily meditation. Just as a good actor must play to the best of his ability whatever role is assigned to him by the dramatist, so also must the man of worth play whatever role he is assigned by fortune. Diogenes the Cynic. All right, that concludes my reading and reflection on chapter 116. I hope you liked it. Thanks so much for listening. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook, A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are below. Your support is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow we'll be reading and reflecting on chapter 117. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.